Welcome to Homeschooling the CollegeBound Student. During this talk, I will give an overview of the considerations you need to keep in mind as you prepare to or are homeschooling your high school student who plans to attend college. I myself am a homeschool mom. On the one side you see a picture from a park day, which is where my business originated. Many years ago, when my kids were much younger, at Park Day, some of the moms with older kids, especially the moms who had not been to college, started asking questions about college selection and admissions processes and financial aid and all of that. As my life progressed, it became evident that I was going to need to work as well as homeschool. So while I was pregnant with my sixth child, I founded Celtic College Consultants back in 2004. At this point, he's in high school. I'm still homeschooling, and I've been serving families across the country ever since. I have a professional certification as well as an excellent education as an engineer at Northwestern and then in theology at Franciscan University. I've written a number of books, including college guides and a general guide to parents exploring options as far as working with college consultants and the different certifications and trainings and expertise that is available. So we have different ways that we can homeschool. Some of us have an accredited program. Some of us are part of a charter school. So our kids technically are public school students, but our lifestyle structure is still very much like homeschooling, and we're doing the work of homeschooling. One slight shift on this is it's not always necessary to apply as a homeschooler if you're in an accredited program. Things have been shifting and different colleges are approaching that different ways. So I would explore the option of simply applying as a traditional high school student if you're in an accredited homeschooling program. And there are a number of these programs. I would ask them for their experience with the particular colleges you are considering, or ask the college anonymously which way they would prefer, if they had any objections, if they felt that they would have adequate information to evaluate an applicant who was homeschooled through an accredited program. If they didn't know that that was a homeschooling program. Because some of them, depending on the schools, like the Catholic colleges are going to be familiar typically with the Catholic homeschool programs. But that's not always the case, that the colleges that we're applying to are going to be familiar with and recognize that, oh, this is a homeschooling program. Now, many of us are doing a non-accredited program, and we're going to apply as a homeschooler. We don't really have an option. There are services out there that, with enough time and detail and not too much money, will evaluate our homeschool transcript and can make it accredited if it qualifies. In general, that's not something most of us need to worry about doing, and we don't do it. We're going to create our own transcript. That's a part of our responsibility. That's something I can help with. There are a number of templates available online. Some of the classes our students take may be accredited. Some of them may not be. We may be doing teaching. We may be employing others to do teaching. There's a whole mix, and it's all fine. But those are generally the categories. And we need to be clear with the colleges, kind of if we're an accredited or not accredited. I mean, if we're accredited, make sure they know it. And if we're applying as a homeschooler and we don't tell them we're accredited, they will assume we're not, and that's okay. Accreditation is not the be-all and end-all of everything. We all need to keep good records. Admissions is looking for our students to take challenging courses and get excellent grades. They'd like to see great test scores, and they want specific requirements. Typically, they'll list those on admissions. If they want 2 years of foreign language, or they want 4 or 3, if they want 2 years of world history or social studies, or if they need 3, what courses they consider in which categories, those sorts of things are spelled out on the admissions pages. So that's what specific requirements include. For some schools, you need a visual and performing arts credit. For other colleges, you do not. So there's a whole spectrum there, but we need to keep good records, especially because for us who are not accredited, because admissions needs to understand what we've done and what our students have accomplished, and what books they've read, what texts they've used, what formats of educational system delivery they've done well with. A lot of our colleges and universities are doing blended programs, so some of the classes are online, some are in person. Some of them are still, everything is face-to-face in a classroom. It's harder to do well in classes that are online, especially if they're recorded. There is nobody pushing you through that class. So the completion rates, we know, the data shows, are lower. So when we have high school students that can get their way through those classes consistently over time, that is a feather in their cap. It does demonstrate some strengths that they have that will be valuable to them. And we know, of course, that we parents are responsible to make sure they get through the classes, but we see, freshman year, we're driving the truck pretty much. By senior year, our students should be self-paced, and we're helping them a little bit here and there and holding them accountable, but they're setting it up their own structure, just like they're going to do at university. So those are actually good things. Sometimes we think they're deficiencies. They're actually strengths. We need to make sure we have the documentation to back up our claims, though, and to help the admissions recognize the caliber of the academics we've done. And record keeping is a big part of that. Keeping a list of all the books read is a good idea. Sometimes we'll submit that as a supplement to the transcript. You definitely want to track all the course providers and the texts used. And if you use something like, I'm using Homeschool Connections online this year for my freshmen, I'm keeping track of who the teachers are and what their credentials are. Because some of these people are college professors that are teaching my son. Some of them are not. So helping the college understand the caliber of the class, and they can see the textbooks and the professor credentials. That gives them a lot of information. Keeping sample papers is a good idea, especially excellent papers. There are a number of colleges and universities across the country that will require, and some will invite you to submit a paper as an example of the student's writing. So keep those excellent papers. Just have a little file. To validate coursework, sometimes we are asked for some extra scores. Or, a lot of us have learned, it's just a good idea to have those. When my oldest son was a freshman, I homeschooled him independently, which meant I did the teaching, and his biology class was a high caliber, and I could see that. And so when we finished the year, I gave him 2 weeks to study, and then I had him take the CLEP exam in biology. And he did well enough. He got 6 credit hours of college biology based on his CLEP score. There was no question in anybody's mind when he applied to college that he had done a very thorough study of biology. AP scores can provide similar validation of coursework, so can SAT subject scores. So let me explain these three a little bit. All of these are products of the College Board, which is collegeboard.org. SAT subject tests, some selective schools will require or recommend, which is a soft way of saying require unless you can't afford it, that you submit SAT subject tests. And that is particularly true in the sciences, and they'll specify that they want math 2 and they want 2 sciences, or they want this or they want that. So those requirements will be available on admissions, and you want to look at them early. These tests are offered throughout the year on SAT test dates. If you go to the College Board website, you will see that on the subject tests, which subject tests are offered on which SAT dates. They're not all offered on every date. Those tests last an hour, and you can take up to 3 of them on any given SAT test date. You cannot take any subject tests on the same day as you're taking a full SAT. It's an either or. The full SAT takes the entire testing time. The 1, 2, or 3 SAT subject tests will take 1, 2, or 3 hours in the midst of, or at the same time as, the SAT is being given in other classrooms. Those scores can validate your coursework and be another way to demonstrate your academic prowess to admissions. They do not turn into college credits, however. So unless the colleges require them, I recommend you take either the CLEP or AP tests. So AP tests are high school level tests. There are AP courses, which as homeschoolers we can take through the Pennsylvania Homeschooling group, which is available online. All of the AP classes are. But we don't have to take the AP course to take the AP test. AP tests are given in May over a course of 2 weeks. And all of the AP English language and composition, for example, every student's going to take that on the same date in the morning or the afternoon around the world. And AP US History, same thing. AP Psych, same thing. So those tests need to be taken at brick and mortar high schools. So for us homeschoolers, that means we have to work with a local high school and get their permission to come onto campus to take that test with their students, as well as arrange for and pay for the exam through that school. You are going to want to reach out to the school in the fall. The College Board moved the date up, so they are ordering tests now in like November for May. So that was a significant change. So you'll definitely want to be in touch with them in August or September or October at the latest if you are planning to have your student take the AP exam on their campus. They do not have to let us on campus. Even though our tax dollars are paying for their school, they do not need to let us on campus. So it behooves you to get to know that policy early. There is a testing coordinator at the high school. Typically, that's somebody in the counseling department, but not always. But that person can let you know whatever their policies are and whatever the procedures are to get your student connected so that you can register them to take the test. And what time to be there, all of those sorts of logistics. So if your school bounces you and says, nope, we won't let you on our campus, sorry, won't do it, keep looking. A lot of times the private schools are more open to letting us on their campuses than the public schools, but it varies. And then the CLEP exam is a college equivalency test. It, like the AP exam, these are both offered in about 30 subjects, and the colleges will take them in admissions to document what you've done and demonstrate your academic prowess. But then after you're accepted and you're going to go there, they get sent over to the registrar's office and evaluated by whatever the policies are at the college or department. And you get credit depending on your test score and depending on their policy for AP or CLEP. That can both turn into college credit, or the SAT subject test cannot. Okay, let me move on. There's also the DSST, which used to be known as Dante. These were initially set up for military families, and they still exist. It's getcollegecredit.com is their website. They list the sites, the schools that will accept them, and they offer far more subjects. And some of the non-traditional subjects, like business skills, there are a number of tests in that arena, for example. So you'll want to look and see what of your students' elective courses typically have a test. And then they list the colleges, just like the CLEP site also lists the colleges that will accept those tests for credit. So that's another opportunity to document, validate your coursework and the caliber of the academics that your student's doing. So during the sophomore and the junior year, you have some options. I don't know why I don't have the pre-ACT on here, but the PSAT now has an 8, 9, and a 10 version. So sophomore year, you would take the PSAT 10. It's like the SAT, like the PSAT, just scaled down for a little bit less academics. You learn that style of exam. You get scores which are nationalized, which helps you start to have a feel for where your student is performing in relation to his or her peers, which can be helpful when you're starting to explore your colleges and wanting to see academic fit. Those scores can be very helpful. The CLT, the Classical Learning Test, some of you may be familiar with, especially if you're doing a classical education style in your high school. That's available. Also, starting sophomore year, you get your score immediately, and likewise, you can use that to help you explore the colleges you want to go to. Then junior year, the PSAT becomes the National Merit Scholarship Qualifying Test. A few students will be, the top 10% by every state will be national semifinalists. They'll get letters. After that, they'll be asked for their transcripts to validate, etc. So, and you'll need to take the SAT later, again, to have a good score, all of that to become a national merit finalist. It's not the only scholarship system in the world, but that's one. But be aware those are going to happen sophomore and junior year. Career exploration, major exploration should be happening freshman and sophomore year. Starting to visit colleges should start happening freshman and sophomore year as well. Test options, mostly I want to mention test optional. About a third of the colleges these days are test optional for admissions, but they are not test optional for scholarships. So they have to abide by the donors' criteria when the scholarships money was donated, which is typically where a lot of that comes from. And a lot of that's keyed into test scores. So be aware that you may be applying to go to a test optional school, but you will be closed out of some of the scholarship opportunities because you don't have a test score. Okay, the SAT has a critical reading and writing section and a math section and an essay. The ACT also has a science section, as well as your reading and English sections and your math section and an essay. Classical Learning Test has your verbal and your math. And I will tell you that the materials used for the reading selections are significantly different. So if you're using a classical great books texts, those are the kinds of texts that are used on the CLT. Anything goes on the SAT and ACT. So could be different. And the CLT also has an interesting feature that it's actually harder and to score in the very high scores than the SAT and ACT. So top students are starting to take the CLT in addition to the ACT or SAT to demonstrate that they are super proficient, because the SAT and ACT both have a curve that is used to correlate the raw score, the number of right questions, into their scaled scores. And so that varies each time, but just with the way things have been managed, it's easier to get a perfect score these days. So there's more kids with perfect scores walking around, and they want to differentiate themselves, especially at the more selective schools. And so they're using the CLT. Some of them are starting to use the CLT exam to do that. So just letting you know kind of options there. But these are things to be aware of as you're homeschooling your college-bound student. We have some advantages, and when I've spoken at conferences to admissions people, I tell them, especially at the selective schools, to hold us accountable to this. but we have a little more time, and we've got flexibility in our structure that the traditionally schooled students do not have. So our students can pursue their particular academic interests. You can have a student that has 6 years of science or something. If that's their field, they can just take more of it. We just have more options. One of my sons is on track. He'll have 4.5 years of philosophy in addition to his other classes, which your typical high school student doesn't have any idea about philosophy. Because of their time flexibilities, they can also do more community service, leadership. They can hold jobs during the day. They can do some things that are different from the other students. Obviously, the flexibility to school around their other activities and schedules. Guess what? That's exactly what you do in college. So that is a strength that our kids are building. We have control over the curriculum and can really tailor it, which is in some ways similar to what you do at college with picking your major and the concentration in the major. But also you've got 3 professors teaching philosophy 101 or physics 101. Which one are you going to take? Well, this guy, does more experiments, and I'm a hands-on learner, that kind of thing. And we set our own graduation requirements. Now, I'll tell you that it's prudent to set them so they meet or exceed the college entrance requirements of the kinds of schools that our student is looking for. So we'll get into this a little bit more, but that's something you want to keep in mind. In general, the 4-year course plan, you're going to have 4 years of English, 3 years of math, 2 to 3 years of science with lab, biology, chemistry, physics. It's not that hard to do labs at home these days. There's a lot of things available, even from when I started in 1998, there's far more available. 2 to 3 years of history or social studies, 2 to 4 years of foreign languages, perhaps some visual and performing arts, and meet specific requirements. It depends on what your student is doing. If I've got a student who is a musical theater kid, we're going to have a lot of visual and performing arts and probably extra literature classes and maybe some extra foreign language classes, maybe some extra history classes. And we're going to do what we have to do in science and math, most likely. Where other students, they may have 6 or 7 science classes, 4, 5, 6 years of math. Other students might have extra years of English and do creative writing and fiction and this and that because they're publishing and they're doing whatever they're doing. So this is the basics. Pay attention to what the colleges have to say and then cater to what your child's strengths are. That's a way that they can demonstrate that strength. I really love whatever the subject is, and you can see that because I have 7 years of it during high school. And, I've already taken the tests in this field. I'm going to be starting as, sophomore, junior standing in my major, etc. So all of that comes together very well as we're preparing our kids. Dual enrollment is something that a lot of us do with our CollegeBound students. In many places, the tuition is waived, which is really handy. In some places, you can actually earn your associate's degree and your high school diploma at the same time. Certainly, the students can develop a field of interest. It's nice to take a lab science with a real lab and not your garage or kitchen, but you can get into an orchestra, choir, other things that are hard to do independently. You're going to apply as a first-year applicant. You're getting that college credit while you're in high school. My only question about that, and it depends on the colleges how they look at it, is if you're doing an AA or an AS degree as a high school student and you're concurrently graduating, do they consider you a transfer student? There are arguments on both sides, and so there's different policies on both sides. And that would be my only concern about it, because the financial aid is much more geared toward first-year students. So even if you're a first-year student who's going to come in with junior standing, coming in as a first-year student and getting those scholarships, there's far more of that available than there are for transfer students. So some things to consider as you are moving forward. as I've mentioned a little bit in the past, you want to identify and pursue the interests of your student, help them develop their talents, pursue awards, be high impact in whatever they're doing. Take things to the limit, to the best of your ability. We have limited time and energy and money and all of that. But what can you do? What can you foster for your child to go excel in his or her areas of strength? Creating portfolios, getting published, giving presentations, creating events to give presentations, going into the brick and mortar school to give a presentation or do something or participate in something, etc. There's a lot of options, and there's things that we can create ourselves. So you'll want to look for those and talk with your child. Encourage your child's initiative. Dream. And have your style. But dream. Let them dream. Encourage them. Let them grow. Foster that. And don't be afraid. There are many colleges out there. Many different opportunities for our kids to excel. So I'm hoping that all of this has given you hope and encouragement. When I work with students, I have proven methods and strategies that I use over the years. I work very hard to prepare them very well for college in the career exploration and study skills and all of the becoming who they are parts of life. I work diligently to select colleges carefully for my students. And then on the financial side, so there's abundant funding from various sources and various strategies. And I put all that together to call it college success. My students over the last 5 graduating years have an average of over $230,000 each in scholarships that they've been offered. That's looking like that's continuing for this year. So it works. It empowers the students, gives them a voice, strengthens them, prepares them, helps do that whole matchmaking with the universities, and as well as the funding in mind, and really helping them become the people that they're created to be. There are options. I have a do-it-yourself kind of college prep support program. I meet with you a little bit each month and kind of give you the nudges you need, answer your questions while you're doing the heavy lifting. I have one-on-one full-service college prep consulting services that I provide. I have a la carte services where you can hire me to do this part or that part, and I offer discounted test prep. The best way, if you are interested in just discussing where you're at or in collaborating in some way, is to schedule a consultation. A professional consultation, we will talk for an hour, the parents and the student and I, about every aspect of it. Your extracurriculars, your academics, the documentation piece, the goals, the financial side of things, whatever other dynamics are in the picture. I'll answer your questions. And if you'd like, I'll provide you information on options to move forward if you would want to do that. And that fee will then be applied to those further services. The best way to do that is to go to CelticCollegeConsultants.fullslate.com, select my name, Katherine O'Brien, and explore the dates and schedule a consultation through that site. You can also reach me through my website, CelticCollegeConsultants.com. My phone is there and my email. All the best to you. And, let's keep on keeping on. Homeschooling can be tough, but the rewards are amazing. So I'll see you in the future. Have a wonderful day. Here's to your success.